The U.S. is sending 3 warships to the waters of Venezuela as part of a major counter-narcotics operation.
The strike begins far from cameras, with U.S. Navy vessels holding their lines in the Caribbean, while a B-2 bomber, cloaked in stealth, cuts across the sky. Its mission: a hidden cocaine processing lab near Venezuela's border. Seconds after release, precision ordnance erases the site, scattering fire and smoke into the night. Washington would call it a necessary blow, allies would watch carefully, and Caracas would erupt in fury. This is what happens when the U.S. Navy wipes Venezuelan drug labs off the map. President Trump signed a new sweeping directive that asked the Pentagon to prepare to use American military force against certain Latin American drug cartels the administration now treats as terrorist groups. This is not a small shift. For decades, fighting drug trafficking has been mainly a law enforcement job. Arrests, indictments, seizures, and cooperation with local police. Now the White House has moved the needle toward treating some cartels as enemies on a battlefield, and the Department of Defense has been told to draw up options for how to fight them with regular military power. At the center of the policy is the designation of a Venezuela-linked network long known in reporting as the Cartel de los Soles, or Cartel of the Suns. U.S. officials say the name comes from the sun insignias sometimes worn by Venezuelan military officers. The Treasury Department and state have labeled the Cartel de los Soles as a specially designated global terrorist entity, and they tie senior Venezuelan officials, including, in the government's account, Nicolas Maduro, to the trafficking networks that supply deadly drugs and help fund violent groups. The same U.S. actions also officially list Tren de Aragua and Mexico's Sinaloa cartel among organizations treated as terrorist or specially designated groups. These moves give American agencies new legal tools and signal a willingness to treat narco-trafficking as part of national security strategy, not only as domestic crime. By putting groups like the Cartel de los Soles, Tren de Aragua, and even the Sinaloa cartel into the same box as terrorists, Washington didn't just add names to a list. It opened the door to using military power in places in ways that used to be off limits. That legal step matters because it lets the Pentagon plan real, kinetic options: strikes at sea, raids on shore, and missions to seize people or places that U.S. leaders say threaten national security. To get a feel for what that looks like in the real world, you don't have to imagine. Look at the U.S. fight with the Houthis in the Red Sea. When the U.S. decided the Houthi campaign in the Red Sea had become an intolerable threat to shipping and to American forces, the response arrived not as a single thunderclap, but as a tide of steel and fire designed to overwhelm, shape, and intimidate. Over a few intense days in March 2025, the sky above Yemen was carved into a mosaic of smoke, contrails, and flash. At least 40 separate air raids across the country as jets, armed drones, and long-range bombers hunted targets from the capital to the far northern governorates in one day. The strikes on March 15th were concentrated and brutal. Multiple hits in Sana'a, some in residential quarters, one at the International Airport Complex where a military facility sits amid civilian infrastructure, and clusters of blows in the Garaf neighborhood of Shub district, each strike painting the skyline with columns of black smoke that billowed and spread like ink across the pale desert light. Up north, Sada took a pounding. 12 strikes there included a hit on a power station in Dayan that ripped the lights from neighborhoods and left entire towns in sudden humming darkness, a small sensory detail that reverberates far beyond the outage itself. Military sites in Taiz, Dorum, Haja, Marib, and Damar also felt the impact. Craters opened in brown earth, concrete facades were peeled away, and the air filled with an acrid, metallic smell as fuel, wiring, and damaged munitions burned. Local broadcasters and social feeds posted grainy footage, flashes, then a pall of smoke. Neighborhood streets clogged with panicked residents and scattered debris. Ambulances threading through crowds toward hospitals strained by the sudden flood of casualties. From the sea, the carrier air wing punched up into the morning sky. Fighter jets from the Nimitz-class carrier USS Harry S. Truman loomed on deck and then streaked from catapult into the northern Red Sea's thin haze, their afterburners snapping like matches, releasing long, hot exhaust trails that faded against cloudless blue. Complementing them were Air Force attack aircraft, and armed drones launched from regional bases, a layered ballet of manned and unmanned platforms that struck to suppress air defenses, sever supply lines, and collapse hardened sites. The result was a combined arms pressure cooker, a synchronized application of ordnance meant to force options and movement upon the defenders. Then there was the B-2, a different kind of instrument in this orchestra, entered not with noise but with a cold, architectural menace. On March 27th, stealth B-2 Spirit bombers were forward deployed to the Diego Garcia Atoll, a remote U.S. hub in the Indian Ocean long used to project power across the Middle East, a move that signaled both capability and intent. That deployment, the first significant B-2 presence there since 2020, underscored the Pentagon's ability to reach deep, fortified targets from far-flung runways. Up close, the B-2 looks less like a plane and more like a shadow that learned to fly. Its flying wing silhouette is a deliberate void, a seamless sweep of composite skin and edge geometry that eats radar and confounds trackers. At 172 feet across, the wing stretches wide and low, a black, toothless shark that rides the air with no vertical tails to betray it to radar. 4 powerful General Electric F118 engines sit buried in its body, supplying high subsonic thrust, while the airframe's low observable coatings and sculpted surfaces keep the bomber ghostly against electronic watch lists. The cockpit seats two, pilot and mission commander, but the aircraft's real strength is in its long reach and heavy, precise punch. A combat radius measured in thousands of nautical miles, extendable indefinitely with air refueling, a payload capacity well into the tens of thousands of pounds, and the ability to carry specialized bunker-busting munitions able to chew through reinforced subterranean facilities. 5 months earlier, in October 2024, B-2s had flown long-range missions against hardened underground weapons storage sites used by the Houthis, striking targets designed to hide missiles and munitions deep beneath the earth. Those sorties, staged with tanker support and overflight permissions that stretched across the Indian Ocean and northern Australia, were meant to demonstrate reach, the ability to hunt and unmake facilities that ordinary strike aircraft could not reliably defeat. Analysts watching the March 2025 activity read in the Diego Garcia move a familiar logic. When a campaign needs to make an argument against buried, dispersed infrastructure, the B-2 is the aircraft chosen to deliver not just bombs but deterrence. Technically, the B-2 brings a surgeon's toolset to that job. It can carry GPS-guided JDAMs and standoff missiles for surgical strikes, or heavier penetrators, massive ordnance designed to burrow through layers of concrete and rock when targets sit under vaults of reinforced earth. Its stealth lets it approach contested airspace with reduced detection, and its onboard systems pipe in real-time targeting data so bombs do not simply fall, they follow a precise, digitally choreographed route from carriage to impact. The bomber's very presence atop the order of battle forces adversaries to spread defenses thin and reveal hardened caches that might otherwise stay hidden. The operational lesson from Yemen is twofold. First, modern power projection is layered. Carrier jets take the quick, flexible shots, drones keep persistent pressure, and strategic assets like the B-2 arrive when there is a need to hit the buried, the hardened, or the high value with near certainty. Second, those same methods that uprooted underground Houthi stores apply elsewhere. Deeply concealed drug labs, subterranean storage vaults, and reinforced tunnels used by criminal networks can be hunted by the same mix of ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, precision munitions, and long-range strike. The B-2's demonstrated capacity to find and destroy hardened underground facilities in Yemen provides a blunt, albeit controversial example of how buried targets, whether military depots or illicit caches, might be addressed from the air. Now fold that picture back into Venezuela's clandestine cocaine processing laboratories along the country's 2,300-kilometer border with Colombia. The alert goes up across command centers and forward posts. A strike package is en route, designated to neutralize hardened sites. Radios hum, briefings are short, men and women in uniform check maps and status boards. A mission clock counts down in a room lit by screens. The words used are blunt. Target set, ordnance assigned, mission approved. The tone is clinical, not celebratory. High above, the B-2 Spirit arrives as if it were a shape cut from night itself. It flies on long, silent legs. Its flying wing profile is matte and flat, built to slip past radar and reach far-off points without fanfare. From the ground, it looks like a dark shadow widening across the sky. There is no visible tail, no broken outline, only a low, broad sweep that moves with steady purpose. The bomber carries a quiet weight. Inside, two crews sit among screens and panels, watching a calm web of data. The B-2's power plants and systems are hidden beneath smooth skin and special coatings that cut down detection. Its strength is range and reach. The plane is made to go far, to carry heavy loads, and to deliver weapons meant for hardened places. It travels with tanker support and works with other platforms. But the scene on the ground is all about what the bomber brings to bear from above. When the strike arrives, the world below reorients. A faint flash marks impact. The sound comes later, a deep, rolling report that moves like a wave. Structures built to hide industrial work, low warehouses, buried vaults, rooms with false floors, are shattered. A cloud of dust climbs and then spreads. Metal frames bend. Concrete blossoms into rubble. The lab yards that were once quiet now smolder and send up thin columns of black smoke. In the Red Sea, the U.S. operated with clear maritime choke points and strong international backing to protect global shipping lanes. Latin America is a far more delicate stage. Nations across the region fiercely guard their sovereignty, and Mexico, along with other regional powers, has already rejected any notion of foreign troops on its soil. Even Washington's closest partners resist the idea of U.S. military strikes in the hemisphere. Maduro drove that point home recently, warning that any attack on Venezuela would mark the beginning of the end for the American state. With the political stakes high and Maduro's warning echoing in the background, the operational side of the campaign would begin at sea, where interdiction efforts hinge on spotting and stopping cartel boats before they can slip their cargo ashore. Sea interdiction starts with finding the boats and stopping them before their cargo ever reaches shore. Picture a net of ships and planes spread across a stretch of ocean. Big warships hold long-range radar and launch missiles. Smaller cutters and patrol boats race out to close with suspicious vessels. Maritime patrol aircraft sweep from above, their crews watching for odd wakes, patched-up hulls, or boats moving in strange patterns at night. Drones hover low and long, sending clear video to operators who can zoom in on deck activity. Helicopters carry teams fast from ship to ship, dropping down to put feet on a suspect vessel in minutes. When a target is identified, the work moves to contact and containment. Patrol boats box the suspect boat in, forcing it to slow. A helicopter or small boat brings a boarding team alongside. These teams are trained to move quickly and calmly across a wet gap between hulls, often with climbing lines and ladders. The first team's job is short but vital. Secure the deck, find the captain, and make sure no one is hitting a hidden kill switch. Next come searchers who move through the holds, under tarps, inside engine rooms. They look for hidden compartments, bales of drugs, or barrels with bottles of evidence inside. K9 units can board too. Dogs can sniff out hidden caches in cabins or below decks. Maritime interdiction teams work like a medical team running into an emergency. They bring tools to cut open false floors, hand lamps to see into dark holds, and kits to photograph and tag anything they find. Evidence is gathered and photographed from every angle. Crews may move seized goods to a nearby ship or transfer suspect crew for processing. If the vessel is unseaworthy or too risky to keep, teams can scuttle it or tow it to a safe port. Throughout, the goal is to stop the load and keep everyone as safe as possible. Precision strikes are a different kind of tool. They are used when there is a hard target ashore or at sea that cannot be boarded safely, or when time and surprise are critical. A strike starts with intelligence. Satellites, patrol planes, human sources, and signal intercepts all point to a place where weapons, drugs, or command hubs sit. Planners then build a strike package, a mix of ships, aircraft, and missiles chosen for the job. From ships, Tomahawk cruise missiles can be fired hundreds of miles to hit hardened compounds or storage sites. From the air, Carrier-based jets like the FA-18 or long-range bombers can deliver precision-guided bombs or standoff missiles that find a small building in a cluster of houses. Strikes are choreographed like a ballet. Electronic warfare assets may blind enemy radars and radios for a short window. Drones and reconnaissance planes watch live to confirm the right target at the last second. Pilots fly at low altitude or high speed depending on the threat, lock their sensors, and release weapons that home in on GPS coordinates, laser spots, or moving targets. Where possible, weapons are chosen to limit blast radius, so nearby structures are not torn apart. After a strike, reconnaissance aircraft and drones quickly overfly the area to confirm results and to look for survivors or secondary threats. If stores of drugs are destroyed, teams photograph and catalog the damage for intelligence and follow-up. Special operations raids mix speed, stealth, and precision human action. A raid typically begins with tiny teams, often no more than a dozen operators, moving under the cover of night. They might arrive by low-flying helicopter, fast boat, or parachute drop. Helicopters come in fast and hover close, while operators fast rope to a roof or slide onto a deck. In riverine or coastal areas, rigid hull inflatable boats slip quietly to a jetty while Navy divers slip into the water to breach seals or undersea doors. Operators move in small practice formations, clearing rooms door by door, their movements rehearsed until muscle memory takes over. Inside a raid, objectives are clear and limited. Seize a person, capture documents and digital devices, rescue hostages, or secure evidence. Teams work with search kits to rapidly copy hard drives and photograph paper files. They have medics ready for wounded people and engineers who can quickly render safe any booby traps or weapons caches. If the goal is to take a leader, extraction is planned down to the minute. A path to a waiting helicopter or boat, a secure holding space on board, and a route out that avoids known enemy forces. Sometimes a raid is designed to destroy a lab rather than take people. In that case, once the site is secured, they place charges or use incendiary tools to deny the site to future use. On the ground in Venezuela, the situation is complex. The U.S. case paints the Maduro regime as deeply entangled with trafficking networks. Venezuelan officials call those claims false and label U.S. moves as interference or attempts to seize oil resources. Meanwhile, ordinary Venezuelans continue to live through economic collapse and political repression. If military options are chosen, the people most affected may not be cartel bosses, but citizens already struggling with shortages and displacement. That harsh reality is a core reason why both military planners and policymakers are weighing their choices so carefully. The tools are being readied, but the consequences will ripple far beyond a single target. In short, the new directive is a turning point. It shifts a long-running narcotics fight toward a model that blends law enforcement, intelligence pressure, and potentially direct military action. The Houthi strikes offer a recent case study of how the Navy and carrier-based fighters operated together. Super Hornets launching from carriers and Tomahawks fired from ships. And the lessons from that campaign will inform any plan to move against cartel networks at sea or on foreign soil. What is still unclear is how far Washington will go, how regional partners will respond, and what the human cost will be. The plans are being written now. The choice of whether to use them will be one of the defining foreign policy decisions in the months to come. This isn't the first time Washington has set its sights on Venezuelan drug labs. History has a strange way of circling back on itself. Old battles reappear in new forms, and past mistakes echo into the present. In 2022, as the world was still reeling from a deadly pandemic, another battle was quietly brewing in the Caribbean, one that had nothing to do with viruses, lockdowns, or face masks. This time, it was about cocaine, corruption, and power. The man at the center of it all was Nicolás Maduro, Venezuela's embattled leader. The man trying to take him down was Donald Trump, and the stage where their conflict collided was the vast waters of the Caribbean Sea. In March 2020, Donald Trump did something that caught almost everyone by surprise. Standing at the White House during what was supposed to be yet another coronavirus press briefing, he suddenly shifted topics. Instead of talking about masks, ventilators, or infection rates, Trump announced a military operation, a big one. He authorized the U.S. Navy to launch one of the largest counter-narcotics missions in the region in decades. The United States had just indicted Maduro on charges of narcoterrorism. Prosecutors claim Venezuela's leader and his inner circle were running a cocaine empire, smuggling more than 250 metric tons of the drug into the U.S. every year. To put that into perspective, that is enough cocaine to keep an entire nation high for months. The indictment was more than just legal paperwork. It came with a massive bounty, a $15 million reward for information leading to Maduro's arrest. Suddenly, the president of Venezuela was one of the world's most wanted men. Trump's response was swift and dramatic. He sent Navy destroyers, surveillance aircraft, and even special forces into the waters off Venezuela. In total, the mission doubled U.S. counter-narcotics capacity in the region. And it wasn't just America acting alone. 22 partner nations joined the operation, turning the Caribbean into a chessboard of warships, patrol planes, and submarines. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper said cartels, criminals, and terrorists were taking advantage of global chaos during COVID-19. While governments were distracted by the virus, these groups were moving drugs, laundering money, and spreading violence. The U.S. was not about to let that slide. Trump echoed the same message, warning, "We must not let that happen." But this mission was not just about drugs, it was also about politics. Maduro's government had been locked in a bitter power struggle with Juan Guaidó, the U.S.-backed opposition leader who was recognized by nearly 60 countries as Venezuela's legitimate president. Maduro, of course, refused to step aside. Instead, he doubled down. His chief prosecutor even summoned Guaidó for questioning over an alleged coup attempt. Few expected Guaidó to comply, and fewer still believed Maduro's motives were pure. The real message was clear: defy me and you risk prison or worse. For Washington, this was a red line. The Trump administration had already warned that harming Guaidó would bring serious consequences. But in truth, Maduro was already playing a dangerous game long before these threats. Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, one of Maduro's loudest critics, put it this way: "If I was just indicted for drug trafficking by the United States, with a $15 million reward for my capture, and with the U.S. Navy conducting anti-drug operations off my coast, I'd be worried." And Rubio was not exaggerating. Maduro's government had been under pressure for years, squeezed by sanctions, accused of rigging elections, and charged with human rights abuses. Now, with the U.S. Navy practically on his doorstep, the message could not have been clearer. Time was running out. But Maduro was not about to roll over. He blasted the charges as nothing more than American propaganda. He called Trump a racist cowboy who was only interested in Venezuela's oil, the largest reserves in the world, and he fired back with his own accusation. If the U.S. was so worried about cocaine, why weren't they focusing on Colombia? After all, Colombia was a U.S. ally, and the majority of the world's cocaine came from there, not Venezuela. It was a clever argument, at least on the surface. But U.S. prosecutors countered that Maduro wasn't just turning a blind eye to the drug trade. He was actively directing it. The indictment accused him of working hand-in-hand with Colombia's FARC rebels to flood American cities with cocaine, destabilize U.S. society, and line his own pockets. Meanwhile, ordinary Venezuelans were caught in the middle of this geopolitical storm. For years, they had suffered under hyperinflation, food shortages, and collapsing hospitals. Millions fled the country, creating one of the largest refugee crises in modern history. Those who stayed faced a government accused of corruption and brutality, and an opposition too weak to remove it. Now, as the world battled a pandemic, the Caribbean was becoming the backdrop for yet another chapter in Venezuela's long crisis. On one side, there was the world's most powerful military, backed by dozens of nations, with billions of dollars in resources at their disposal. On the other side, there was a socialist strongman accused of turning his nation into a cartel state, clinging to power at all costs. This was not just about cocaine. It was not even just about politics. This was about survival for Maduro, for Trump's legacy, and for the people of Venezuela. And history showed why this moment mattered so much. The United States had been here before. In the 1980s, Ronald Reagan launched similar missions in the Caribbean, targeting cartels and communist influence. The U.S. invasion of Panama, codenamed Operation Just Cause, began in the early hours of December 20th, 1989. After months of rising tensions and a formal indictment of Manuel Noriega on drug and racketeering-related charges, the campaign's official aims were to protect U.S. citizens, secure the Panama Canal, restore democratic processes, and capture Noriega. The operation unfolded as a large joint force action. Roughly 26,000 to 28,000 U.S. troops and more than 300 aircraft were committed in the opening days, and combat included airborne and Ranger parachute assaults, SEAL raids on key airfields, AC-130 fires, and precision strikes to seize runway and command nodes. U.S. force planners executed simultaneous moves to overwhelm the Panama Defense Forces and seize critical facilities across the isthmus. Manuel Noriega dodged capture for weeks, sheltering first in various locations and then within Panama's Vatican embassy. After intense pressure and a sustained campaign of operations, he surrendered to U.S. troops on January 3, 1990, and was flown to Miami the next day to face indictment. Noriega's subsequent federal trial in Miami resulted in a conviction on multiple counts, and in July 1992, he was sentenced to 40 years in prison. The invasion's human cost and legality drew sharp international criticism and widely varying casualty estimates for Panamanian civilians and defenders, making Just Cause one of the most politically charged U.S. interventions of the post-Cold War era. So would Maduro end up like Noriega, dragged out of power and onto a plane bound for Miami? We're just about to find out.